And Sarah Shippey and Tabby. Okay. Meeting is called to order at 6:35. Do we have any public comment? That's good. Public comment, additions to agenda. I don't know why I write them like that. It's pretty much the same thing. Review and accept minutes of April 25th. Patrick's minutes.
Can I ask a question, just for a format question? Is Sarah considered, she's a liaison? She's not a member of the committee.
No.
She's a liaison.
No.
Member of the,
She's a member of the office.
Of the planning commission. She's a liaison from the select board, right?
Right.
okay,
So the guest would be
Tabby and Sarah.
correct. And as far as minutes go, I guess people present, time, and any motions, first and seconds are mandatory, and everything else is
So moved.
to discretion.
Yeah.
Discretion,
move.
yeah. You guys want to take a minute and reread the minutes or what? I haven't looked at them in a week. Great job.
Yeah, I move to accept the minutes from the April 25th, 2022 meeting.
Thank you, Michelle. We have a second?
I'll second it.
All right. I guess that's all right, huh? Yes, we're done. Thoughts on town meeting? Is anybody planning on going to town meeting? Was it a week from tomorrow?
It's the 17th,
A
right?
week from tomorrow?
I kind of gotta.
me too.
What'd she say?
I'm hoping to attend at least
I
part of
kind of
it.
gotta.
I'll be there.
Yeah, I'm thinking I might, but I'm gonna be away the 4 or 5 days previous to that and home at midnight that night, so depends on what shape the farm's in when I see daylight. We have a very partial glimpse of our survey question in the town report. I don't know if we should consider printing the entire answers and having them tabled. Do you guys want to proceed with that, or what do you think?
What I'm,
Could you, I didn't follow that.
yeah,
We have a synopsis of our survey questions in the town report. Do you guys want to pursue printing the entire survey results and having them on the table?
no.
Why?
I don't think anybody's gonna dive that deep. I think if we have them, I think having something where we tell people that they can go to a website and look at it is plenty, but you're talking, how many pages are you talking about?
I'm trying to think how many questions she's got on
Wasn't it?
the
Well, we
pages.
have a good 20-something.
Yeah.
To make it understandable, we'll have to print like the graphs and the grids and the various things like that. So it would probably be at least a 10 to 12 page document.
So two graphs per page, probably not front to back because that's tough to do with color on paper.
10 to 12 page minimum to.
I don't think anyone-
It's up to you guys. I just have. a
People aren't
feeling.
gonna pick up something and that big. I mean, people just, they don't do that anymore. They'll pick up
True.
1 or 2 page piece.
Absolutely. It took us enough to just get them to pick up the survey last year.
Yeah, well,
And
that
the
was,
summary is in the town plan.
if they look at it, I still think.
Well, if they're not
old
gonna
school.
look at it in the town plan, they're definitely not gonna pick up a 12 page document off a table and look at it.
Right.
Well,
I-
it's-
I thi- Maybe just have little handout cards with a website or something.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh, well, how about maybe we just do one copy and leave it on the table? I mean, I kind of think that everybody that took the survey, there's a good proportion of those that are going to be back there.
but
at
Kevin,
meeting.
you're asking, if there's one copy, you're now asking somebody to stand at that table during town meeting and read the document.
Well,
The
there's,
only way that I can think that would be a useful way to present that for people wandering about would be to get a couple of those big, school report size cards and make up something where you have, up on an easel, you know,
I
6
know,
pages of this
two-
and 6 pages of that, like a little
well,
present.
two by
Yeah,
3
2 by
foot
3
cardboard,
things.
yeah.
And, people could stand there and look at it. That's the only way that I can think that anything in print would make any sort of an impact.
Right,
Well, I guess the question is somebody gonna stop and look at it? That's the question that Sarah's asking, and if they do, what do we want them to do with it?
well, they took the survey, they should be interesting to, for us, looking at
But
some of those results were somewhat eye-opening, some of them, I think,
But that information's in the town report. And
only,
anybody who's interested enough is going, maybe maybe have something that should have been stuffed into the town reports that said, for more detailed information, go to, and have the link.
right.
Was
And
that part of what got put in the town report?
I
I don't
can't
know.
recall, I haven't looked at it in weeks.
Oh, hold on, it's out in the.
I know we have the partial, but I'm fine, I just running it by you guys,
Plus, I don't think one copy is good.
No, right,
COVID is going rampant right now in the valley.
bad, it's bad
It's bad.
it's bad everywhere.
Really bad.
My wife's school got closed for the week.
Yeah,
It was
so
actually
I don't
better.
think people should be really touching like
No,
one
that's it.
copy.
Like I said,
and-
the only way that I think it might be of any use is if we did cards, easel
Right.
cards and,
So I'm looking at the report, we do have a link where people can go get it.
All right,
So
that's
let them do
fine.
it.
So if
Perfect.
anybody says
if they
anything,
don't understand it, they can ask somebody.
no,
Yeah.
right,
You picked out, looks like you picked out 5 or 6 of them or 7 or 8.
Yeah, I had-
They can look it up. I mean,
right, okay, I'm fine, so we'll table that, and there's a glimpse of it in the town report, and there's more if they want to dig.
mhm.
Housing chapter, I guess natural resources is pretty much a wrap.
Did you open up the town plan piece as a copy of?
Not on purpose.
Okay.
I maybe copied it, I maybe made a copy of.
Because I see 543, all of a sudden,
Oh, no,
our
I didn't do
editable
that.
version is now copy of.
I didn't do that, not today, I haven't been in it today.
I don't think I did that.
Well, it's got 5:43 PM, so
So
somebody
it's
did
today.
it.
Well, I was looking at it, but I didn't reformat it or anything.
I'm not talking about reformatting,
Whatever.
I'm just anyways.
No, I downloaded a separate copy for myself because I didn't want to mess up with that.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I did that somewhere else, so.
all right, well, let me open it up unless you want to open it up, are you gonna be typing in it or,
No.
okay.
No, I don't,
Then-
I'm not.
But as far as the housing chapter goes, as a general statement, I think we need to look really hard at improving, or streamlining the process for people to create accessory apartments, mother-in-law apartments, place little houses, little homes on property. So we have a real housing problem. And if we can make those kinds of things direct the town or encourage the town to be more, to make applying for those things more streamlined, I think we're going to help ourselves. That we don't have places to put people to do the work that we need done in the town.
There is a housing committee, by-town housing committee meeting tomorrow. to talk
No,
about.
I mean, I know about Bytown. What I'm saying is when we write our town plan, the section on housing needs to be, to very strongly support the idea of making smaller or multifamily residences more, making application for them simpler.
Okay, now, the current way that one would, and I have not re-looked at the housing chapter, I need to probably take another quick look at that. But it is part of the standard zoning application process to be able to apply for that. But I think if we put in the paragraph that has come out of the legislature strongly supporting the use of accessory apartments and accessory dwelling units, ADUs, et cetera, with some of that information, and I'm looking at updating the zoning application as it is, so I will maybe have a checkbox that says this is for an ADU, accessory apartment or accessory dwelling unit, with some things like that. That's a specific section that they can easily look at or fill out. Do you think that would be helpful, Sarah?
Well, I think as much as we can possibly do.
Okay.
I
Right,
mean, even to the point of, we have zoning to look at like pocket development in certain areas where we could do basically what would amount to like a PUD
So
in a sense, where people could put multiple small, like little houses that they could go on a parcel.
I started to bring that up either last week or last time or previously, and looking at how we approach density, because both the state statute and the bylaws allow for one and only one accessory dwelling unit or accessory apartment on a parcel. So if you wanted to put 3 tiny homes, unless you were in a zone that would allow that for the density, that's not going to work unless you have, and this is something that we may want to look at as we look at things like the exceptions to the density requirement. The only exception is either for affordable housing as part of a land trust or as part of an employee housing thing. So I think maybe some of those sections we want to take a deep dive in and say, do we need to adjust some of those requirements and some of those density requirements to then allow for the ability to create ADUs, additional housing, allow for a multifamily home as a permitted use rather than conditional use and things like that.
And I think that we can, yes, I think we should do that. I think that we should look at perhaps limiting that in terms of zoning to places that are along the mover routes.
The 100 corridor?
Basically, yeah.
So the question then is, in East Dover, there are some parcels that people have approached me about. I would like to make a bunch of tiny homes on parcel X.
Mhm.
And it could be a 6 or 7 acre parcel, but it could be in a zone where they could only have 2 or 1, or depending on, or it could be in the pro zone where you could have potentially 2 units, a primary dwelling and an ADU. So even though it's not on the 100 corridor, doing a cluster housing PUD, some kind of something, gets interesting in the challenge of how to be able to permit that fits within the density
Right.
mode. Yeah, so I think this is gonna take a chunk of wading through in great detail. I don't think we're gonna be able to, buzz through this, in some
Right.
sections. This is gonna take a little bit of work on the collective, all of our parts.
And I mean, the nitty gritty of it is going to happen when we write the bylaw.
Right, but the
Right.
bylaw has to come out of this. So that,
Yeah, but we need to, the town plan should be aggressively supporting the idea of creating alternative approaches to the housing shortage.
right, so then the bylaw and the zones and some of the zoning and the density structures come out of, and I will double check to make sure I am not misspeaking, but that is all supposed to come out of the town plan.
Mhm.
So if we adjust some of those items in the town plan, or I mean, would the aggressively support, alternative housing options,
Mhm.
but yet then is that generality enough to then dive into the bylaw to change? Because we need to create a definition of a tiny house. We have a mobile home, but we don't have anything relating to tiny house and sizing. I actually looked up and got multiple definitions from the state of what is considered a tiny house. And there are at least 5 different definitions. And things like the AAs and ADUs and the density. So to what definition the town plan will steer what we put forth in the bylaw. This is a whole thing in here. Wyndham Housing Trust, Community Land Trust. So the housing trust, a lot of what we could do
Mhm.
for alternative housing requires it to be under the aegis of a land trust, whether it's Wyndham Windsor, whether it's a separate land trust. And that's definitely been a stumbling block for a couple of developers who've come into me saying, hey, if I want to do this and do such and such and do affordable housing, and I have to turn around and show them the bylaw, it says, and it must be managed by a land trust. Primarily to keep the prices within the affordable concept rather than it shooting up the market rate after a year. But how
I also want to include, particularly if we're talking about like accessory apartments, that there has to be, that the property owner must be a full-time resident. That it can't be, because otherwise we're talking, people are just going to create more Airbnbs, and that's what we have a problem. We need to not have as many Airbnbs because we need to have people have housing to be able to go to a job.
So there are 2 different types of definitions in the accessory dwelling unit. There's an accessory apartment and an accessory dwelling unit. One of those 2 definitions is for an owner-occupied home. So it's a secondary apartment, which can be either separate or attached to the building or an accessory building. The other does not specifically state owner occupied. There are 2 different size definitions between the 2. One is 900 square feet at a minimum, or hitting a maximum of 30% of the primary dwelling, and the other is up to 1,000 square feet. So if we then say we are going to promote accessory apartments or accessory dwelling units only off of an owner occupied unit, then if the owner is normally occupying the primary unit and then decides to Airbnb their own house, we are now kind of restricting, and we go down the rabbit hole of telling people how they can rent their house.
Well, and that's, but if they're, I'm so talking about going forward, if you're applying for a permit going forward, because none of this stuff, permits don't change if the bylaw changes. If you already got your permit, you're set.
Right.
What I'm saying is if people want to develop an accessory apartment or accessory dwelling, and with the intention of, the town's intention is to create more housing for people who want to be employed full-time in the area. So if we have a streamlined means of those people applying for those things, one of the contingencies would be it has to be a true accessory dwelling where the primary dwelling is owner occupied. And
So
if they
then-
don't want to do that, then fine, but then they have to go through a more onerous path.
Right, now, one of the potential headaches that we may need to look at or talk about is, now, how are we going to define owner occupied? Is that somebody who's living there all year, you know, minus vacation days or a holiday or whatever, and then has filed for a homestead on that house or not. One of the other things I just ran into is a new house just went up right here by the mountain, and after many conversations with the owner and helping him, you know, getting it all properly permitted and zoned and yada, 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 yada. Lots of conversations, and his whole, I can't wait to have my family up there, and we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that. And it's right near Corinthian, the kids will be able to walk down the thing and across the street. And then I get a ping from our fire marshal, who sends me a screenshot of a listing up on a Facebook page that says, hey, here's a heads up, this beautiful home will be available for rental this season for 4 bedrooms and a loft. And our fire marshal asked me, do you know what, you know, do you have any information? Because the name of whoever it was who posted this didn't match. And I went, I think that's the house I'm thinking it is. Let me go take a ride. And I took a look, and yes, it is. And I said, and here's the owner and his email and his phone number, all of that. So all of that foo-for-all
Right.
about being there, and he's turning around, he's putting it up on a seasonal rental. So for all of that, even if I had him sign that this was a family home,
Mhm.
he's still turning around and renting it. We don't have, and this may be where some of the stuff that's gonna be discussed in the meetings or whatever, an oversight software, oversight program where all rentals have to be registered.
Mhm.
That may help in maintaining awareness of, are you living in your property? Are you renting your property? Are you renting out part of your property? The original Airbnb concept was for somebody who was living in a home, whether it be an apartment or wherever, to be able to rent out a bedroom while they were there, make a
Right.
little money. As opposed to an investment vehicle to turn people stuffing into houses. So the entire concept has gone sideways.
Well, I'm just trying to think this through from a practical perspective. So let's suppose somebody has a house that they are using, but their circumstances changed. You know, all of a sudden now they're not compliant because 3 years from now, 4 years,
They
the
don't
kids
live
are
there.
older, they don't want to come up, they want to be
Yeah.
here. They-
Exactly, so this is where that kind of
Yeah.
gets to be a little bit more of a potential management thing. And, you know, unless we have oversight software or whatever, or having somebody else monitor every posting, and we're writing nasty grams, legal letters and things like that, we can't really inspect rental houses as it is easily.
Well, and so thinking about where we want to go, what the objective is, and I think, Sarah, you said it really, I think this was the thing, when I first read through this stuff this week, I was like, well, what's the objective? Are we trying to promote rental houses for people that are here living, or affordable housing for people that are living here full time? Are we here trying to encourage affordable housing to really account for the surge for people who work here in the winter? You know, what's kind of the goal here? It sounds like from what you said, Sarah, it's, look, we want people to come here to live here, and we want them to be able to afford to live here. And that's something that's not just here, but also, you know, pick every other resort community in Vermont and around the country. They all have the same problem.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. And one of the questions or the difficulty is, okay, we want people to live here and work here full time.
Yeah.
But if their skill set is a snowmaker, they're here for 3 months and then their job goes away.
But
So-
Mount Snow has Snow Lake Lodge for housing employees.
Now
That's
they do, yep. Mhm.
so those part-time seasonal jobs are not the issue.
It's the
And,
full-time
you know,
resident. Yeah.
And it's one of these, like, it's the chicken and the egg thing. Can we can get if we can get people to live here, are there jobs for them to take?
Yeah.
Or can we have jobs, but nobody's here to take them, so they go elsewhere? Like, how do we, you know, this is it's a huge fraught issue. But I think we need to start, you know, I understand what you were saying about Airbnb and how its original intention was completely subverted.
Mhm.
You know, that's a problem. For me personally, I think that's really, you know, because now not only are people now not renting out a part of their house, but they're just renting out their whole house. Those are that many more residential units that are just completely off the market.
Exactly.
Like
So-
people are buying these things and never living in them.
Yeah. And they're buying them and flipping them and flipping them. There's a couple of properties that I've had to deal with that are definitely, find out the owners have never lived there. And this is the third owner that's never lived there, and. So trying to, if we have a set of checkboxes that say, will this, and we may want to change, is this a property for rental? Is this, whether it's the whole house, whether it's the ADU or whatever, will this be rented? Will it be rented on a seasonal or yearly basis?
Well, I know.
I mean, and here's the, I honestly, at this point, we actually don't have to solve the problem down to that level, because what we're doing is writing the plan and saying to the town, we have a housing problem. We want the town to be creative in solving it. We think that one of the ways to do that is accessory dwellings and accessory apartments.
And also
And cluster housing, but we
Cluster
don't
housing
write the
and density.
bylaw then. Then the next part is the harder part. The harder part is writing the
Right.
bylaw.
It's pretty easy to say. I mean,
Right.
we've had this
But if-
discussion many times. Everybody supports increased housing, but,
Right, but it needs to be in the town plan.
right.
right.
That's
That's
all.
And then one of the things is that I need to go through this section a little bit in the town plan and see to what level it's talking about here. Promote higher density development in and around West Dover Village and Mount Snow. Well, we've got the highest density in the vacation, in the resort zone, and there's,
Right,
other than Garber's property, there's no empty land. So, and that triangle piece, I think that's the
Yeah, the
resort.
triangle
No,
piece
that's
off
in
the
the
end of my
village.
street, that's, I don't know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
that's in the village,
Is that in the village?
in vacation, not in resort.
Oh.
So as we look at, this is saying promote higher density developments, but in the current bylaw.
Abby, I gotta tell you, I get nauseous with that screen going.
I'm sorry, I'll stop.
I'm
Somebody
getting
tell me
motion
where you want me to
sickness.
scroll, I don't want anybody throwing up with the keyboards.
You
I
just
apologize.
keep us all guessing, Tabby, that's great.
I'm just like,
Okay.
Sorry, as I'm spinning around, sorry.
no, it's okay. I just think it's funny.
So right now I've got the hiccups. So that basically digging through here, to what level does the town plan determine some of the densities? I mean, here it says promote higher density.
Right.
So I think then we're gonna have to go into the bylaw to see what kinds of things we can do to then promote higher density.
Right,
So
this is-
Go
We're
ahead.
painting this with the town plan is painting with a really broad stroke,
Right.
Well,
right?
that's what I was about to ask, Sarah, because I was thinking about, to say
How broad is broad?
promote this, that's pretty broad and completely intangible.
It is, but it then sets down, because it's in the town plan, then when the bylaws get addressed, which is the step 2 of this whole thing, it has the backing of the plan
Right.
to say, now
Yeah.
you can drill down deep in this area.
Because the bylaw is gonna have to get super granular.
Well, no, but what I'm thinking about is still at a high level with something different. Because I watched that enhanced energy video,
Yeah.
and I'm picking up something that they said, that I guess the Public Utility Commission, when they come in and look at town plans on energy, they say, if it's too abstract and too high level, they're not gonna help you. If you say, for example, you have a very specific goal, we want to, I'm making it up and applying it here. We want to have 2 new, housing developments off on Route 100 that meet, this standard, whatever the standard is we
Mhm.
set.
Mm.
Then, by the time, within the next 4 years, or within the next 2 years, then that's a very specific thing, right? I don't know if we want to get that specific. I guess, Sarah, I'm looking to see if you nod or shake your head, whether it's better to be that specific to say, we want this.
Well,
And
let
then-
me ask you this question. You were saying that this was based off of what you were watching in the energy video.
Yep,
And you said they will not help. Who is they?
there was the I think it's the public.
Public
utility-
Service Board or
Whatever,
Public
whatever
Utility
the
Board.
state body, whatever the
PSB.
state body is, it's
Yeah.
the state body they mentioned.
So I don't believe that there's a comparable state body that would accept or decline the opportunity to help us with this based
Okay.
on our town plan.
Okay.
So maybe that's a piece of research that needs to be done, is to find out if there's support at the state level or the county level for developing a more aggressive or more robust housing situation. And are they going to look at our town plan with an eye towards whether we're worthy of help or not?
Absolutely, they
Right?
will. Sarah,
But is
the,
there a board that would do that? Not the energy, like you were talking about the Public Service Board. Is there a comparable-
the regional planning commissions meet regionally. The number one planning goal in the state of Vermont
Mhm.
is increased housing. It's in the regional plans, it's everywhere. It's gotta be supported by,
Well, and then maybe one of our specific things are, you know what, we have a strategy to promote at the state level, because this is a problem, not just for us, it's a problem in every other resort town here.
well, it's not just resort towns, everybody,
Well, yeah, it's
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm putting it in our context, right?
right?
And in our context, maybe we need to affirmatively, get our state representatives and our delegation to actually get out there and, help us with this problem.
Isn't that what the Bytown Housing Committee is
I
trying to
don't
do?
know.
So
Yeah.
they're trying to do that. Tomorrow's meeting is on some,
But you know, the whole-
meeting is on- But just taking a look, we just jump in. If we look up here on strategies, I pulled up and I made it a little bit bigger. We have a couple of things that I think, even as this stands, we may be able to manipulate the bylaws to work with this. Existing hotel or motel space or accessible structure, but the second bullet, consider greater density bonus in the planned unit development provisions of the bylaw to encourage affordable housing. So I'm thinking that right there, considering some of the people who've come to me with questions, that PUD density might be usable to create tiny home park rather than mobile home park, cluster housing with tiny homes, something along those lines. Because that is where we're hitting a wall with some people who said, hey, I've got this, 14 acres and a PUD that's in a district that's a 5-acre district, that's
3 houses,
dwellings,
2 houses.
2 houses.
But
So
you do,
something that,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, so that right there, that is something that would be an immediate advantage for people who are wanting to consider doing PUDs or whatever, is taking a look at what conditions we can put on adjusting the density
Right,
if the PUD is for affordable, appropriately priced units, or if it's a bunch of tiny homes so that the investment is small.
So should we then turn this consider greater density bonus to I don't know the process, you can poke holes in my statement of the process. Establish establish and secure approval by the, whatever the right body is, the select board.
I think you wanna,
The density bonus in these provisions to encourage affordable housing. So it's a thing that we say in the plan, we're gonna do.
right,
Yeah.
take consider out there and say something like the town shall
Yes.
move forward with planned unit development. But
Investigate and create a density bonus.
it's-
There we go.
Yes. And create, right. But the problem you get into is, so you got a 5-acre unit that's now only or a piece of land that's now only allowed 1 unit, and you want to have multiples there. How are we,
Well, it
as
would
we're
have-
planning, gonna draw the line and keep this from happening all over?
Because
Because you don't-
all of that as a PUD has to go through the DRB, it has some very specific application requirements and everything else, and the DRB, the Development Review Board, can say, sorry, this is not meeting our criteria of an affordable density thing.
Right, well, that's one
So
way, but
there is a way to,
I'm thinking that we don't want to outreach our initial land use and zoning the way it's set up now, so we should say, and the
sorry,
town
Sarah, I'm trying
shall
to get my highlights.
be able
I'm
to
closing
use.
my eyes, Tabby.
Sorry,
you
Tell
know,
me when
you-
you're done.
Go by the lot
Done.
next to your house and put one of these on it, is that what you're saying?
well, no, we're talking
So
right now.
Kevin, your concern is that we're gonna then have development kind of running amok?
Well, I'm thinking that if we say the town should, you gotta, we want to encourage it.
Yeah.
But we don't want it to go overboard. And once you make the exception, the floodgates are open. So we
Right.
should say something like up to 10% of our such and such conservation land should be considered for PUD or
No,
something.
not conservation land.
No.
Not conservation land. We can limit this to
Not
certain
conservation,
specific,
but
A
residential.
PUD is expressly prohibited in the conservation district.
So it's what, village and.
so it could, yeah, you would have to be by district.
Mhm,
Right.
right,
And you
so,
could, and it wouldn't even have to be in, we could have like a PUD 2
mhm,
that was specifically designed for affordable housing.
There you go.
exactly.
That's
That- that was
Could
what I
be,
was
that we
interrupting
could
for.
choose to only allow that in 1 or 2 districts.
You know,
We wouldn't even
or,
have to allow it in the same districts as a PUD.
right, or a PUD would, PUD 2, you know, would
Right.
have to go under review, let's say preliminary review by the DRB to see if the projected project will start to meet that criteria,
Right.
so that they could then go through the whole kit and caboodle of everything that they need to do. So they could get a preliminary review of the concept. If the DRB says, okay, bring us your plans, bring us all the details to go for final review and approval. Sarah, I don't know.
We actually, I mean, we offer that to anybody who wants it for any application. They can come to the DRB without making an application and review what they're proposing and get feedback before they go through the application process. So you're suggesting we mandate it.
No, I'm just saying is that, well,
We already do
maybe
that.
I was saying that. Okay, I think then maybe we need to make it
Encourage.
more clear that ideas can be brought forward to the PUD pre-application, because, excuse me, this is something where I may be wrong in thinking that if somebody was bringing a proposal before the DRB, it needed to be a full application and proposal.
And I mean, it's always heavily, you know, like at least like 20 times during the session, we say, now this doesn't mean we're approving anything,
Right.
right? That it's made very clear that here is the you know, we're looking everything over. We see that you're missing, you know, these 5 documents. So you're going to want to make sure you get those. But once you get them, that still isn't a guarantee that you're going to get the permit. It just means you're going to come into your application prepared.
No, exactly, and so
And
this
it-
is maybe
right.
where,
And the board can ask them questions and, you know, which is a way for them to understand kind of the things that we'd be looking for.
okay, I'll definitely want to review a little bit of this with you offline, because it was my feeling that, you know, if they were going to bring something before the board, it can't be a nebulous concept of, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. It has to be, you know, the application may not be complete. The board may want paperwork X, Y, and Z to complete the application, but it had to be a thing.
Well, no, it doesn't have to be an
No.
application. They can come in and say, we want to build a theme park. Cool. Show us an application. Well, we want to do it over here. Well, we know that's not zoned for it. But, you know, if you want to do it over there, we would look at the application. Like you can come in with as nebulous a concept as you want, because nothing is even investigated for approval until it's an actual formal application.
Okay.
Have we recently had anybody who you think that got kind of gotten stuck by this?
Sorry, say that again?
Yeah.
If we had anybody
Density,
that's come
yes.
in that's been kind of stuck on this concept where they come and, you know what? You know, we want to do this thing, but they've got to have a completed application and.
No, really, I kind of just steer them down. We need more than,
Okay,
you know, a ballpark idea to come before the board, but we have gotten stuck, and I have 2 or 3 different people that I could turn around and reach back out to say, you know, the density requirement may be available to be modified on parcel X because they want to put a community, a cluster, a PUD cluster of 10 tiny homes, but the current density on the parcel they were considering will only support 4.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I literally can pick up the phone and call 3 people who would come in and purchase property and try to do this.
Well, it's not going to be, we're not going to be even close to that for another.
Oh, no, I'm just saying is there is active interest
Right,
by people who are not able to necessarily continue with an idea of a cluster or tiny homes or something
Right.
like this because of our density requirements.
Do we have to wait? Let me ask just a really dumb question. Do we have to actually?
dumb questions maybe.
Yay. Do we have to wait for the town plan to be completed and revised and approved before there are any revisions to the bylaw? Or if everyone looks
Yes.
around and says, boy, this is a great thing, let's just do this now?
Typically, yes, we have to wait,
Okay,
but because the town has to vote on it. We don't, the planning commission and the select board don't just change the bylaw.
okay.
We
it's a
have to
town-
actually rewrite it and it has to go to a town meeting.
Oh, okay. All right.
But there's
So we
nothing
typically
that-
wouldn't do it, piecemeal. We would typically do it as a more cohesive thing. But I think if there was something that was really, really compelling, like if we came up with a really interesting kind of creative way to address the housing issue,
Yep.
that it would be worth having a conversation with the select board, asking to come to the select board meeting and presenting the idea and saying, is this something that you would consider voting a bylaw change as a standalone item or as an addendum to the bylaw
Yeah.
rather than wait? I mean, I don't know that they're allowed. I'm not that clear on when it gets to the state level, what we are and aren't allowed to do by the state. Like, I don't know if the state says we have to make our changes once every 10 years, and they all have to happen at the same time.
Yeah.
But when we look back at the previous editions of the bylaws,
Mhm.
there were quite a few changes that were made, sometimes 6 months apart, a year apart, 2 years apart that were done.
Yeah,
My bet is in some sort of piecemeal way, and we can even double check with Andy on some of that. But the current laws may have changed. So
Right.
that, was a considerable period of time where there were no changes made to the bylaw. I don't
Right.
know why there were no changes.
I think at some point we're going to need to go over, we're going to need to start running a list of what we are and aren't allowed to do, and then have a meeting with the town attorney.
Yeah, are you,
Yeah, I'm gonna check with Wyndham Regional because they have their bylaw review
Mhm.
people. I can talk to John, I think, on that.
VLCT might even be able to answer.
Exactly.
More importantly, we have to come up with a brilliant idea, then we make this a problem.
Well, I think the brilliant idea is that right now, I'm loving the idea of a PUD, a special PUD to address.
PUD.
There you go.
I think
Oh,
that's what we change it to, a
That's
PUD.
good.
PUD, I love that. So if we're looking for a single bright shiny
And
penny.
that's DEUX like too, like in
Oh.
French.
That's
Yeah,
right.
then we're gonna have to put do it, D-U-X, do it, make it Canadian and we will do it.
Yeah.
But that, and if we can craft some sort of concept and bang on that a little bit, in my head, that's a bright, shining, immediate help with a bylaw that could have a faster impact on the town than a bunch of the other things that we want to do. And I've got pages of incidental changes and definitions and this and that, and all kinds of stuff that we're gonna need to go through until we fall asleep. But something like that, I think would have an immediate impact.
Yeah.
Well, immediate being relative,
Yeah,
but what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we need to think about what we would, I think that this is a conversation you and I could maybe have offline and then bring back to
Absolutely.
back to the planning commission once we've hammered out some of the ins and outs of it, maybe.
I think
rather
so.
than
Let's
make everybody
let's do
sit here and
that.
listen to us brainstorm.
Are you sure that bylaw changes have to be voted on at town meeting?
Yeah.
I've
Well, they
asked
have to be
that question,
voted,
I've got two different answers, so I
they
need
have to be
verify.
voted on at a town meeting. It doesn't have to be the town meeting. We can call a special meeting.
Oh,
Mhm.
like a special select board meeting.
Right.
Right, but it's a special town
The
meeting.
special town meeting, it has to be
Because it
more
has to be,
different.
we have to be set up for voting.
Right, now,
And
I
it's
have
Australian ballot.
gotten
Oh,
two different answers.
I've never heard that.
I have heard that exact statement from some people. I have heard other statements that say the select board can, vote at a select board meeting to make a change or apply a change in the bylaw.
Well, that's what you would have thought, wouldn't you? Yeah.
But
No,
I
because
got two different answers, so I couldn't swear to either one. My thought would be, do all changes need to go through the
Electorate.
town meeting level, or minor tweaks and minor revisions can be appropriately warned and come up at a select board, and anything major would go through a major meeting, but then why would you have two different processes for the same document? So I just don't have an answer.
Right. Well, there's a difference between correcting the fact that we have, for example, our bylaw lists the size of a parking space as two different things.
Yeah, to me, that would be a,
That's
Get it right and-
basically a typing correction.
yeah.
Right.
Right.
But
But
and I'll just say honestly, as a select board member, I would be really uncomfortable voting on bylaw changes that the town hadn't gotten behind. Because that's a
Right.
big change.
Yeah, and that's kind of where, I see that is, if we wanted to do, and something that we had talked about is adding a new definition.
Mm.
Is that bigger than a bread box? Is that smaller? Is it informational?
Well,
Yeah.
now we're talking, we're not, I mean, it also depends on which definition you're talking about.
Well, for instance, we do not have any definition of a tiny house. We don't have a definition of what it is, what the size is. Is it a tiny house on wheels, which would make it a mobile home, which has a different set of sizes associated with a mobile home? Or is it a tiny house that is dragged in and then plunked on foundation, never to be moved again? So, and I've gone up to the state, I've got a bunch of different definitions that we can look at and consider, but.
Well, and I'll just say, adding a definition of a tiny house to the bylaw is a small change. Rewriting the bylaw to address where a tiny house can be placed and what possible, whether it's permitted or conditional and all, that's a big change. So adding the definition is not a big change. It's what we do with that definition afterwards that's a big change.
Yeah.
Right, and that's the thing where a lot of people could have a lot of opinions about, and some strong
Right.
opinions about, right?
Exactly,
Yeah,
so I
no.
think getting the
Bring it
definition,
on.
Right.
whatever, gives people something that they can address, as opposed to, well, I think a tiny house should be this, I think it should be that.
Yeah.
And size is one thing and movement is another. Is it brought in or is it movable? Does it become a trailer? Does it become a mobile home?
Or
A
is it,
mobile home is
Well,
only
that's the thing.
mobile.
or is
If it
it,
moves, it's a mobile
or is
home.
it less than 800 square feet?
And by definition, most tiny houses are between 160
Yeah, there you
and
go.
400 or 500 square feet,
All right,
half the size of a mobile home. So this is where some of these that needs to be kind of hashed out. And a mobile home is mobile when it's brought in. I don't know how many mobile homes are then taken away.
and of
Like
course,
trailers.
it's all based on whether or not it can hook into North Branch or Perk and whether there's water. I mean,
Then it becomes, is it a camper?
Well,
Is
you're
it-
gonna end up with different answers here, right? You're gonna end up with an answer that applies right here and an answer
Yeah.
that applies over
Well,
there.
the thing is if
Yeah.
we're gonna
Yeah.
make a mobile home community, mobile homes, now I'm doing it, tiny home
Tiny home.
community. That by definition, unless it was a campground, which falls under a different definition, and a campground can be a physical, a bunch of tents, or it could
Okay.
be physical shelter structures,
Mhm.
which could be a glamping fancy thing, but you could still be carried, take it in, take it out.
So, so in the spirit of thinking about ways to be careful not to get it wrong. So my son lives in a small mining town in Nevada. When he landed there is not enough housing for people that land there, right? Company pointed him to a real estate agent had some rapaciously high, expensive rental apartments. He got into a rental apartment, it was furnished, it was threat. Half the people that he works with live in RVs because there are not enough houses there. And there are multiple RVs, RV locations, parks, or whatever you want to call them, or better. Some of them are nice, some of them are really kind of ratty looking. And there's a whole range, and we have to think about being careful not to, the unintended consequences here. I think they're struggling, that town is struggling very much with the unintended consequences of, we'll just have at it,
Well, and I think you can also address that through the PUD
Right.
kind of thing. And if it's anything that's a conditional use, we can put conditions on,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
conditions could be something like the amount of screening between the adjoining road and the residences. That there has to be a certain amount of landscaping, there has to be a certain amount of visual protection, so that
Right.
if somebody wants to create a trashy looking trailer park, they're not doing it where we're all looking at it,
Yeah, right.
And
kind of thing.
you still need wastewater. You need wastewater approval. Even if you're going to dig outhouses, you have to get a potable water and wastewater permit from the state. You have to permit an outhouse.
Right.
So.
Outhouses aren't allowed in Vermont any longer, I was told the other day.
Outhouses are done now?
Only ones are the ones grandfathered in.
Okay, so if you had to apply for a permit for that, the state will say, nope,
No permit.
Mine
no
was,
bounce that.
you gotta tell your zoning lady that yours was dug 30 years ago.
Yep.
In hope she doesn't know the difference.
So another thing I'm gonna echo on
hand
what
gesture.
Patrick,
I know, I'm just saying.
What,
I
Becky?
don't think we have too many, you would know, hunting camps that have outhouses in Dover, do we?
There are a few,
Couple.
and there are some legacy ones. One of the things that this is gonna need to take a look at is previously off-grid, and I'm doing the air quotes thing here, off-grid housing was considered, oh, it's unimproved, it's a hunting camp. Well, nowadays, there are people who want to be completely off-grid. They've got solar, and there really isn't a specific provision in the bylaw right now as how we address full-time off-grid use. It's not a hunting camp, it's, there may be no plumbing, there may be no, they've got a solar thing for power. But that is one of those definitions and one of those uses that needs to be fleshed out more.
Yeah.
Due to current people's choice on how to use their land versus nobody 30 years ago, you were either, in a hunting camp kind of thing, using it X amount of time, or, you were really roughing it off grid. Now there are very fancy off-grid houses being built, so.
But we don't need to, what do we need to do different for them? They're a house. They need to do what a house does. If they
Yeah.
can perk, right? If they can deal with their wastewater
Well,
within their property.
That's part of
With
the issue with
composting
wastewater.
toilets or whatever.
if they're gonna be a permanent resident, then they have to have a
And
permanent
they have to-
system.
They have to have some sort of a permanent system,
Yeah,
a wastewater
absolutely.
system, and
But that could be composting toilets and and
you
their
still need a
own.
septic system eventually.
yeah. There still needs to be some sort of a system to handle that. There are some specifics in the DEC and the wastewater section about composting toilets, and are you going to be burying that material on site? Are you going to be taking it to a wastewater or refuse area? Last time I asked, and this may be changing, I don't know, but North Branch does not handle output from composting toilets or other types of systems that need to be drained.
They want people to hook up.
They want people to hook up, and unless you're on an existing line, that's not happening. So here, North Branch does not have the facility at the moment, and like I said, is they may change that in the future, and I hope they do, to handle waste from non-septic, non-sewer connected systems.
So can I
Delivered,
backpedal and
delivered
just,
effluent.
may I
Go
just backpedal for a minute and go back to what Patrick had mentioned about the tiny homes?
Please.
Go, babe.
So being part of Shire's housing. Excuse me. Being part of Shire's housing, we own a mobile home park, which pretty much is similar to a tiny home park. So we own the land and the tenants owned each of their mobile homes. Well, as the mobile homes started to leak and deteriorate, they move out, and who's stuck with those tiny homes or mobile homes?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Exactly.
that's a huge, right now, drive through Pownell, Vermont, and I'm gonna say I wouldn't want to see one in my neighborhood. That's just my opinion. Because people, a lot of times, they're not taken care of. So there has to be something where, you know, maybe they don't sell the tiny house, they rent them so that they have to maintain them. That's just my opinion, but
Yeah, and I think that's a very legitimate concern.
Absolutely.
Because
I
we
mean-
don't, what we don't want to do is create situations where we're creating,
a mess.
you know, well, like slumlord conditions.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. And, you know, and I gotta say too, you talk to anybody who is a landlord around here, and most of them are washing out of wanting to rent because people mistreat the property, the rental property so badly.
Yeah.
Been there, done that. Yeah.
Right? So that, you know, that's another aspect of it. And I don't know if that comes into the town plan or not, but that's something else.
And
I just
without-
would not like to drive down roads in Dover and see tiny house developments just in shambles, because
Right? You
I
mean like Dover
see-
Watch,
what's that?
like Dover Watch.
I don't even know what that is.
It's on the way up to the golf course on the right.
That's up the place it's all
Oh,
falling
yeah, the
apart.
place is falling apart.
Yeah.
Just falling down. They're not
Okay.
tiny, but
Why don't we,
So,
why don't we take that place
let's
and
take
put housing
Dover
in
Watch
there?
as an example for a second.
Yeah,
okay.
The shareholders or the timeshare people or whatever, have been selling off to a management company or whatever. They're all trying to get out of that. The current, and the people who are buying it up and wanting to continue the building or whatever, come in, oh, we're grandfathered, like, no, you're not. But the current density in that area will not allow anything additional to be built. So the Dover Watch building that is crumbling into the ground and needs to be, you know, totally raised, they could build up something there, but they could not, whoever the overall corporate overlord has been buying up these timeshare people, cannot build anything additional. They are at their max for what there is on that
Their
property,
density.
although there is additional space. So if somebody wanted to come in, buy out all the rest of the timeshare people, raise what has to be raised, refresh, rebuild, do something, they can't build any more units to hopefully recoup some of that cost, which is considerable considering what a mess all of that is now. So they can't take
Well,
it any further due
Here's
to
the thing,
density.
Dover Watch was originally envisioned and permitted for a much higher density. And then the permit expired, the bylaw changed,
Bingo.
and you know, the way they budgeted, the way they planned financially, they were gonna have all these other units, and so it would be, you know, that was how they were gonna make it affordable.
And
and
now,
how the timeshare program worked, but now that they can't build anymore, there's no money coming in for maintenance. None of the people who own the timeshares want to fix it up because they just own a share. They don't own the property. Right?
Mhm,
Well, it's not their responsibility, but yeah.
yeah,
Right, but that's what's going on.
so it's just basically falling apart further and further, and
Mhm.
the people who wanted to try to buy it out, fix it up, take it from timeshares into condos or some sort of an ownership structure,
Mm.
you know, every once in a while they'll poke their heads up and try to say, oh, well, their grandfather, they can build more, and we're like, no, everything's
It seems-
expired, no, you can't.
It seems like a perfect place for affordable housing. I mean,
Yeah,
It very well
we
could
should,
be.
maybe we should just make it a goal that Dover should,
What, buy out Dover Watch?
no, just,
well,
just kind of pursue or, I
That
mean,
there-
it's land. It's
Well,
gotta be
well,
torn
maybe
down.
maybe we need, and this is, again, I don't know that this is the place for the conversation, but with that we work out or encourage the idea of a public-private partnership
Mhm.
Yeah.
to develop
Yeah.
certain parcels that are being underutilized.
Or incomplete. And one of the things to make that happen is we will have to make either a variance or an adjustment to the density to allow some of this to happen.
Mhm.
Because that is, the density regulations is what is bringing some things to a dead stop.
Right.
I like the idea of some creative approach on properties that are underutilized right now. I mean, I think about this one, but if you just drive this stretch, there are a handful of them here on Route 100, and as you get off on other streets, you see more. I mean, it just, to me, that feels like that's something we could get people behind, you know?
Part of the challenge will be, you know, here we are at the high point or a high point of the market.
Yeah.
Getting people to commit to sell, to buy whatever parcels for something that they may or may not see that same value.
Right.
You could put, you know, a $1.2 million house on it, or you could put two tiny homes on it, or a house with an ADU that would rent for $1,200 a month. And I'm just making up a number,
Yeah.
I could be way off, but X dollars a month,
Mm.
you know, where is the return going to come to the owner, builder, developer, the fastest?
Yeah.
Especially considering how much time it takes to get anything built, cost of materials, et cetera. We're at the high point, so it makes it really challenging, other than going out to a modular tiny home manufacturer or whatever to say, bring us 6 units and plant them here, and here we go.
Well, at the end of the day, look, if we agree to a change and it went through the process, whatever the process is, 6 months to a year, that'll happen.
Yeah.
You know, everything feels like it's gonna start softening, you know?
Take a look at the market, things are gonna soften fast.
Ultimately, people are gonna make their own investment decisions. Do I wanna do it? Do I not wanna do it? Do I think I'm gonna get an adequate return for the risk that I'm taking, or their incentives from the state or the community? They're gonna go through all that stuff, right? But it feels like this idea of coming in and saying specifically, getting away from the investigate and consider, but investigate and create things that are on this list, and the strategies and policies here to come into very affirmative, specific things we want to start doing, so that when we come back and review the plan, the next one, the one after that, unless somehow we all decide, no, we've had enough.
Unless we die by then.
Then we can say, you know what, we put that down, we put a stake in the ground, we actually did this. We said we we're gonna do 6 things. We accomplished 4 of the 6 things. That's pretty good.
I definitely would like to possibly pursue, and this is again, Sarah, we will dive into this ADU
Yeah, you created it. You own
80
it.
PDU,
PDU,
PDQ,
PDQ, ADU, PDQ.
PD2.
PD2. Because if we can get this figured out to an appropriate review of the state, the county, our attorney, all of that stuff, and at least get this enhancement to the developability, ooh, I'm not gonna say that twice, of some parcels that I know there is interest in, then we can say, oh, remember we spoke a year ago and there was this question about density? Well, guess what? That has changed. Are you interested? I mean, there are some people who are on the hook and who would be very interested to then reconsider some of their development options.
Right.
At least two of which are both interested in affordable housing community projects. One of them was like, oh, we want to build this little tiny home community and have it as Airbnbs, and I'm like,
Go away.
not necessarily, but the density won't work anyhow. But they were very bright, shiny young architects from Yale, and they're like, oh, we want to do this and all this. Well, there may be a way. It could be that we determine that a percentage of, let's say there were 10 tiny units in a unit community, and 70% of them have to be affordable
and rented on a minimum of a semi-annual basis.
semi-annual basis, and then the other 3 you can keep flipping them and
Right.
do whatever you want with them. But an appropriate
what would be
percentage.
really cool?
Ooh.
Create a tiny home community, but model it on the Habitat for Humanity plan, where people would be owning their property. They would have backing for the loan, and they would have to contribute a certain number of hours of sweat equity to creating the property.
That would be fabulous, provided they know which end of the hammer to hold.
Well, that's what you don't just send them off there on their own. You have community members who are trained, skilled craftsmen who act basically as GCs.
Something like that could be really exciting.
But the family or the couple or whatever that are getting the property have got to contribute a certain number of hours of sweat equity.
Yeah.
And then they don't have to pay a down payment for the property. They have to pass there's some background checking, credit checking. But generally they can purchase it at well below market value. But now they're an owner. They're not a tenant.
So potentially, let's call it like tiny home community, where they're now sweat equity in to purchase their home, which would be as if they were purchasing a condo in a condo community.
Right.
So
But they have to agree to ownership for a certain time period. They can't flip it.
They can't flip it. And they're not owning the property underneath. It would be a development or such.
Right.
Well, that seems pretty restrictive. I don't know. I just vision that a lot of people that live in these tiny houses, and I don't know why we're getting that carried away with them, but that they're gonna get bored and be out of there in 18 months because they're gonna want
More room.
they're gonna want a wife and a kid and or more room. I mean,
Well,
it's so.
Yeah, you're hitting on something that while you were saying this, I mean, we're using tiny houses, but that's really should be a proxy for other things. When we talked about the Noble Watch thing, ultimately, it's not just that, it's a series of affordable housing options that we create a structure that encourages, whether it's a public-private partnership or just developers doing it or whatever state program, whatever happens, people come in and do these things. They're consistent with the character of the town. They're reasonably and affordable, and they help us accomplish the goal in this section of creating affordable housing for people, so they want to not only just come here, they want to live here, they want to stay here, they want to just come and work at the mountain in the winter and then leave,
Right. Now, and Kevin, as far as like the restrictions on Habitat House, this is people who would normally never really be able to afford to buy their own home.
Yeah.
Right.
It gives them access to home ownership.
How do they support, do you know, Sarah, do you know how they support the financing piece of that? Does Habitat guarantee a loan or?
I think Habitat works, yeah, I think that there's, because the people involved have got to demonstrate financial solidity, but they don't have to have the down payment. So a lot of times they go through a bank, but I think that the Habitat organization acts as a co-guarantor.
Okay.
Well, actually, Wyndham Windsor Housing does that at Butterfield for the townhouses.
Yep.
And I know, I don't know if it's sold yet, but there's one been empty for almost 2 years because people don't qualify. They don't, either they make too much to go for that type of housing, or they don't make enough to cover the mortgage.
Wow.
And I'll tell you, that's another thing. We're having an issue in Bennington right now, especially since COVID, because people don't want to work. We have apartments that aren't rented because people can't afford them. Even with subsidy, they have to make a certain amount, and they're not. So we have, like, I want to say the other day we had like 40 apartments empty. That's a scary, scary thought right now.
Yeah, apartments are
Mm.
more expensive than my mortgage.
Yeah.
I mean.
Hey, Becky. do
It
you
is,
know-
it is insane that people who have paid rent religiously and faithfully for 20 years can't get a mortgage on a house where the monthly payment would be less than what they're paying for the rent,
That's well put, I know.
right?
That happens
Becky,
a lot.
Becky, do
Yeah,
you-
which is-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's just greed, sorry.
Yeah. Becky, do you have enough familiarity? Do you know how successful Butterfield Common is? I mean, are they full? Are they almost full? Are they?
So Butterfield Common, the rental has wait lists.
Mhm.
For the condos, all of them are sold except for one. When you purchase one of those condos, you cannot make over a certain percent of income if you sell it. You can make back what you've put into it in updates and upgrades, but there's a percent cap that you can make on when you sell it.
Yeah,
No, turn them and burn them.
Right.
right.
And that's because it's the affordable housing piece.
So from, whoever's, I guess it's Wyndham Regional Commission, it's, I don't know, the Wyndham Land Trust.
Wyndham Windsor, yeah.
Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust, yep.
Yeah, so they would regard this overall as, maybe not perfect, but pretty successful. And
Well, I mean, it's the only senior building in the valley, so.
yeah,
So
Yeah.
that, right there, that's a no-brainer.
yeah,
And then the other townhouses across the parking lot are mostly families.
yeah,
And that's the only affordable housing. That and I think there's 2 buildings, one in Whitingham and one maybe in Reedsboro.
Mm.
I don't think I even noticed that we mentioned Butterfield Commons in our housing chapter.
it is in there.
We did mention, it is in there? That
Um,
should be, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like too, I mean, I know we talked a lot about the tiny housing, and this is a little bit of a different focus, but it feels like, could you replicate that model elsewhere within the valley without getting people, without, I don't know how difficult that was to accomplish that, because we were not owners at the time, I think, but,
Now, Tabby, are we able to do some sort of, you were saying that people wanted to do affordable housing, but they had to go through a housing trust. Is that a state reg?
That is in our bylaw.
But we need to figure out if that's something we have to have because the state says we have to have it, or if that's something we can play with.
I don't know, but I will look at that. One of the things I think that was put that way is that we, the town, does not want to have the overhead of managing the income requirements to be in an affordable housing thing. I mean, there's overhead with that, and the various housing trusts are designed to deal with that. So
But
it's
if an
a-
individual or an entity besides a trust wanted to, and it wouldn't be on the town. I just don't, a lot of the stuff in our bylaw is stuff we have to have there because the state says we have to have it.
I really don't know, but I will look that up
So
because,
Shire's Housing is not a housing trust and we are affordable houser.
Okay,
Mhm.
so that's,
So-
that's,
Yeah,
So-
we are a small nonprofit.
So I'm looking at our goals, policies, and strategies for the existing plan, and we do talk, I mean, the mentions of housing trusts are all over this. Policy number 1.2 specifically says support affordable housing projects initiated by nonprofit organizations such as community land trust and housing authorities, as well as for-profit organizations. So we're pretty flexible in this.
Mhm.
cool.
but yeah, then when we drill it down to the bylaw,
Then it gets,
it goes
Yes.
right into the housing trust. So I will look into that, Sarah, because I just don't know the answer to that.
It sounds like the
that-
answer is no, because if Shires isn't required, I can't imagine we are. But
Correct.
yeah, we need to find that out for sure.
Yeah, because it may be that at the time that was put in, nobody wanted to, they weren't as concerned about affordability or it wasn't as desperate. But as times change and the housing stock shrinks,
yep,
that may be something that we can look at and come up with something.
Mm.
well, I also feel like, and I'm not sure how we tackle this, but feels like there's a research question here as other towns like ours that have a similar problem, or has somebody come up with some brilliant solution that we can knock off and modify to fit our needs?
Well, Woodstock has made it so you can't rent out, you can't do short-term rentals except the month of September.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
you're
they
not
came
allowed
down
to
to
do
earth.
short-term rentals except for the month of September, which I don't know why they picked September.
Probably not.
I think it's
I'm not-
foliage.
Leaves.
Leaf peeping.
No, leaf peeping.
I think
I'm
it's
not sure I
peeping.
would want to jump into that.
Can you
That
imagine?
might be a
Right,
really
but I'm just saying,
necessary-
so there have been some fairly draconian solutions.
Yeah.
Well, we can all take a peek, every town that has a plan has a housing chapter. We
Mhm.
could read the 2 pages and see what Stratton's doing, see what Newfane's doing, and
I was just talking to
Just
somebody
put our
at
heads
Stowe the other day
Yeah.
and. Oh, thank you, Becky. I just,
You're welcome. I just sent you all a pamphlet from VHFA,
beautiful.
affordable housing.
So you were saying about Stowe?
Anyway, so I was just talking to a real estate agent up at Stowe who was inquiring about a property down here for her client. Well, we got talking. Talking about how short-term housing is affecting the housing stock and all of that, and she was friends with some of the people in the administration up at Stowe, town administration, so she and I are gonna talk together. I know that the town of Killington put in some of this monitoring software that I was mentioning earlier, and they're trying to manage that, because they've been having a handful trying to deal with the volume of
Yeah.
lack of housing and some various other things.
How active is, I mean, I know they have a land trust and I know they have a housing trust, don't they? Or some type of non-profit town.
They've got something, and I don't really know the details about what it is, and that was part of the, let's dig into some of that.
I just know that because we were walking around there and I saw the signs.
Mhm,
So
yeah,
I was like,
so-
oh, there's something like that here. So-
I know there's something, but I just don't know that much information about it.
Yeah.
At this point. So.
Hey, guys, it's almost 8 o'clock.
eh,
My husband just made dinner.
Ooh.
I think it's time to eat.
wow.
I'm sitting here eating
Um,
candy, so keep my sugar up.
This was a good first discussion on this, but this is a deep
This
topic.
is
It's a-
very deep.
we keep going now. Michelle, do you have anything to add?
Just like, I don't want to talk.
No, I don't have anything to add. It's been very interesting conversation. I'm learning
Okay.
a lot.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think we're all all on board with strong language to encourage housing, it's the how.
Right.
And you know, when I think about the tough part, you know, if I had a place and I wanted to rent it, you can make so much more doing it
Yeah.
short
Short
term.
term.
I mean, I guess it's the
So-
balance of things, right? You don't wanna tell people what they can and can't do with their
No,
property.
you can't, you shouldn't really.
Right?
Well,
But it's-
except we already do.
Well, I know.
Can't have a business in certain places.
Right.
You can't have multiple apartments in a place. We tell people what to do with their houses all the time.
All the time. That's fair. That's fair.
So I think that maybe one of the things we need to consider is that if you are going to do a short-term rental, you have to treat it as a home business.
Well, most people do, I believe.
But
The
they
ones I
don't,
know
they're
do.
not permitted for a home
They're
business.
not permitted for that.
They're not paying taxes as a business.
Short term.
But they're still
rental has to be
paying
a
their
home
property.
business.
And I'm,
They're paying their property taxes, but Becky, they haven't come to the town and gotten a permit. So they're doing this in deeply residential communities who are now, instead of it all being residences, they've got a house next door that's got 25 people cramming into it on a holiday weekend with
I see what you're saying.
cars
okay.
out front,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think of our
Complaints
street.
from somebody
we're
was,
full
you know,
timers on our street.
you know,
So I'm
complaining that
thinking,
he came up here and
thinking two different Airbnb models. I'm thinking like I just purchased a hunting camp
Mm,
primarily for an Airbnb. I'm not gonna lie. I want the land that goes with it for my farm. But
right.
in order to pay for that land, I'm gonna have to rent that house out 60 days a year.
Right. My sister has one. She lives in Connecticut. They had a mother-in-law apartment. They turned it into an Airbnb.
Mhm.
It's still their primary residence. It
Mhm.
just has this attached apartment and they get 125 a night.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot more along the original concept of Airbnb, is having that additional space. But one of my best friends is over in Petersburg and he and his husband bought the house sort of next door and they've got 40 acres and now they have this other house and they rent out the second house as an Airbnb, and it takes a huge amount of oversight for him to, you know, maintain that house in the way that he likes it maintained. But without that, I mean, since COVID and everything else, he hasn't been able to get back to his apartment in the city. He's been up here with his dogs.
I
So-
was a landlord in Massachusetts. I don't wish it on anyone.
Mhm.
I literally,
Want to kill yourself?
what some people did to brand new houses, brand new townhouses would
Mhm.
make you vomit, to be honest.
I think you probably all saw the story on the John and Amy's apartment building in East Dover.
Mhm.
No,
Yeah, let me tell you, I had that up to my armpits and there was, you know, I was telling Amy, I said, if, you know, I can come in, I can violate them, but you don't have anything in your lease with them and you are the property owner, I'm gonna be violating you,
So, yeah, I got you, yeah.
you know? Said, I'll help you in whatever way I can with information. I said, but this is a legal fight between landlord and tenant.
You're right. She's got to have that in the
Uh-huh.
rental
Oh,
agreement.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
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 Mhm.
Well, it'd be a shame because how many other apartments are there in East Dover, you know?
Yeah,
Right.
and, you know, back to, from some of the, maybe the big old farmhouses could be turned into a multifamily home. But depending on what zone they're in, two-family might be permitted, multifamily is conditional. Depending on, you know, what needs to be done, will the existing septic handle a multifamily and maybe not, depending on how it's broken up, so. The cost of converting a house to, let's say, a big old farmhouse into a multifamily could be $40,000 in septic.
So do we feel that the Bytown committee on this have they really started working this, or is there a solution coming up out of that, or? I don't know.
so I'm actually on the Bytown committee. We have been working on different angles. One of the angles is shared housing. I don't believe that has gone very far.
Mm.
That's
I think
an
that's
idea
scary
that
for a
was-
lot of people.
it's very scary. I wouldn't want my parents to share their house with a young family.
Unless it was a family member, right?
Correct, correct. I've seen the good of it and I've seen the bad of it. We had someone come talk to the seniors back in 2000, maybe 15 about it.
Mhm.
And, you know, several of the older women were gung ho to do this, but I really believe their family like pulled them back and said, what are you
Mhm.
doing?
Yeah.
Because I don't know, it is a scary thought.
Yeah.
Well, just speaking from personal experience, I mean, I have had over the past couple of years, bunch of years, especially as I've gone from back and forth to full-time up here, when I was still commuting, I had two ski instructors staying in my house for the season. One was full-time and he lived with me, he was a good friend, he's since gotten married and bought his own house, but lived with me, totally trustworthy. And somebody else who came in for the season who, you know, was, oh, well, we're gonna put you, you know, here's somebody you can talk to with a, you know, for a bedroom for the ski season or whatever. I mean, I've had two different people, I almost had to have somebody arrested. This other person who seemed to be okay turned out to be an absolute psycho. And so the house sharing thing, you can wind up with something that seems to be fine on the surface, and then it
Right.
goes sour and you're stuck.
It's
And
hard.
whether or not you wanna bring the police into your house to resolve an issue, and
Once you get them in there is one
And
thing,
it's-
getting them out's another.
yeah,
That's absolutely correct, because you've invited them in.
exactly, and it becomes a problem. I mean, I had the psycho lady was, you know, letting my dog out and not letting him back in, waiting for him to run across the street and get killed or something. I mean,
That's
and that was, she told the other roommate, oh yeah, I'm gonna let the dog get hit. And it's like, wait, what? So, I mean, yeah, really, really potentially bad and dangerous situations.
Yeah.
I will say that Eric has actually requested and offered to sit in on some of our meetings for the housing part of this.
Yep.
We just have to reach out to him.
Well, I talk to him like every day, so.
So maybe our next week's meeting, he would like to, if he's available.
Sure, be good.
Right. I'm sorry, guys, I'm gonna have to fly.
No problem.
All right,
I think we need
I'll
to
talk to you guys soon. Sorry that I just like went off at the.
That's okay, it's
Thank
dinner
you,
time.
sir. Does anybody want
Bye,
Night,
Sarah.
does
guys.
anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I will make a motion to adjourn at, I don't even know what time it is.
It's 8:05,
8:05.
8:03.
8:05.
You write that down because my computer just froze, so I can't.
Yeah, Becky made the motion.
I'll second it, so Michelle is next.
Okay.
Oh, I wasn't sure. I thought you already seconded. Sorry, Patrick.
You got the second? Okay. Very good.
All right.
Okay, I'm gonna stop recording.
Have a good night, everyone.
You too.